Here are the top stories for today, February 26, 2021. The long wait is almost over. President Rodrigo Duterte will witness the arrival of Sinovac vaccines this weekend. A move towards transparency in law enforcement, the PNP begins its training on the use of body cameras for cops. And reviving tourism amid the pandemic. We take a look at Siquijore's preparations to reopen its tourism industry. Good day, I'm Marita Muaje. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. The country is one step closer to the rollout of its COVID-19 vaccination program. President Rodrigo Duterte will lead the turnover rites of the first batch of Sinovac vaccines from China that will arrive on Sunday. Benj Bondok has our top story.
President Rodrigo Duterte will lead the turnover ceremony of the first batch of China's Sinovac biotech vaccines that will be delivered to the country on Sunday, February 28. Senator Christopher Lawrence Go said he would accompany Duterte in receiving the jabs in a simple turnover ceremony. The Chinese government has donated a total of 600,000 doses of Sinovac vaccine to the Philippines, 100,000 of which will be given to the Department of National Defense. The vaccine donation is part of the commitment of China to the Philippines as stated by Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi during his visit to the country last month. Meanwhile, the bill seeking to expedite the vaccine rollout in the country is just awaiting President Rodrigo Duterte's signature. Sponsored by Senate Committee on Finance Chair Sani Angara and also co-sponsored by Go, the bill also allows local government units to procure vaccines and make advance payments subject to existing laws and to establish an indemnification fund to cover the possible expenses and claims arising from adverse effects of the vaccines. Vaccine manufacturers are said to require indemnity and liability frameworks, which include setting up an indemnification fund backed by legislation to safeguard them from possible damage suits. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Benj Bondok.
While the government is struggling with the delays on the arrival of coronavirus vaccine due to limited global supply, National Policy Against COVID-19 Chief Implementer Secretary Carlito Galvez assured they are doubling efforts to ensure that vaccines will arrive within the first quarter of the year. Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez Jr. is all out in getting the vaccines immediately to start the inoculation program of the government. He said the country might offer to pay a little higher to ensure the early delivery of COVID-19 vaccines within the first quarter.
Mr. President, talagang manipis po tayo sa first quarter kasi total lang po niyan is 5.1 million. Kaya po talaga pong tayo po ay nagkakaroon ng negotiation with the British government and also with China and also with the India and also with Russia na kung pwede po madagdagan itong first quarter na po natin. That's why yung ongoing negotiation po natin sa mga ibang vaccine ay kailangan po na inano po namin na kung pwede sila magkaroon ng early delivery. At nagne-negotiate din po tayo kahit mapamahal ng konti, basta early delivery lang po sila ng second quarter at saka po ng first quarter.
Galvez also emphasized the importance of legislating Senate Bill 2057 as the bill will provide full protection for vaccine manufacturers.
Talagang yung Senate Bill, isa landmark, Senate Bill 2057 at saka yung House Bill number 8648, they really intend to protect not only the manufacturers but also the indemnification fund kung just in case na ma-hospital or merong tinatawag tayo yung adverse effect. Ibig sabihin pati po lalo na yung mga manufacturer kung natatakot po sila because of the adverse effect. Ito pong spirit ng Senate bill will fully give them the protection while we are doing everything in good faith to serve the humanity and save our people from this pandemic.
Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque earlier announced that the first batch of Sinovac biotech vaccines consisting of 600,000 doses will arrive in the country on Sunday, February 28. Roque also insisted that the Philippines is not the last Southeast Asian nation to receive the vaccine supply since the country is only a few days behind its neighbors. Indonesia was the first Southeast Asian country to begin vaccinations with just over 9 million doses being given to frontline workers last month. Vietnam was the latest as it received its first batch of vaccines on Wednesday, February 24, ahead of their planned immunization rollout next month.
De minimis po ang tawag dyan. Yung gap ng pagtanggap natin compared to other countries, it's just days that you can count with one finger. Wala pong malaking ibig sabihin yan. Halos sabay-sabay po talaga dumating sa atin. At halos pare-pareho po dumating sa atin, Sinovac.
President Rodrigo Duterte might get inoculated with Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccine from China. The legal department of the Office of the President is already studying the legality of being vaccinated with the jab.
Well, una-una po, no, alam ko, meron namang parating na Sinopharm, kaya lang po under compassionate use. At pinag-aaralan po if the compassionate use license can be a basis for the President, who is after all the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, no? Kung po pwede siyang pumasok doon sa compassionate use clause ng Sinopharm. Kung hindi naman po pwede, uulitin ko po, ang sabi lang ng FDA, it is not recommended, hindi po pinagbabawalan. So it's up to the President pa rin kung magpapaturok po siya ng Sinovac, although he has expressed his preference for Sinopharm.
COVID-19 inoculation is mandatory for all the personnel of the Armed Forces of the Philippines or AFP as they are on the front line in the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccination program. The soldiers are among the priority group to receive the Sinovac jab.
Kaya po kung ano available at sa ngayon, Sinovac po yun, ay lahat po ng available na vaccine ng Sinovac ay gagamitin sa ating mga kawal. Subalit, kung meron po kaming mga kasamahan na hindi po gusto na Sinovac ang ituturok sa kanila na bakuna, sabihin lamang po nila na gusto nila ng ibang brand. Subalit, dahil nga po hindi naman yon ang laan para sa AFP na kailangan mabakunahan, kailangan pong sila magbabayad ng bakuna na kanilang brand ng bakuna na gustong maiturok sa kanila.
The Department of Labor and Employment is waiting for the response of the United Kingdom or UK on its proposed provision of COVID-19 vaccine. UK earlier requested for an exemption from the deployment cap of Filipino healthcare workers. Both the UK and Germany are seeking to be exempted from the 5,000 cap on the deployment of nurses being implemented by the government to ensure there is an adequate number of nurses in the country. Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello said they expect the UK government to respond on the issue within 10 days. He said that he wants to be assured of the safety of our workers before recommending the exemption cap to the Interagency Task Force for Emerging Infectious Diseases. Bello said the UK may want to send the coronavirus vaccines so the country can immunize the nurses before they are deployed. Meanwhile, UK said it has no plan to accept proposals that would deploy more Filipino medical professionals to Britain in exchange for COVID-19 vaccines. UK Ambassador to the Philippines Daniel Cruz said the proposal was discussed during his recent meeting with Secretary Bello but declined to go into detail. While seemingly opposed to the offer, Cruz said he would be meeting with the labor chief in the coming weeks to continue wider discussions. Still to come, the PNP begins its training on the use of body cameras. And a sigh of relief for motorists as inspection fees for vehicle registration are now cheaper. More on this when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
The Philippine National Police starts training cops on the use of body cameras in a bid to ensure transparency and accountability in law enforcement operations. Members of the National Capital Region Police Office were the first to undergo training on this equipment, which was held at its headquarters in Camp Bagong Diwa, Taguig City earlier today. PNP Director for Logistics Major General Angelito Casimiro said almost 2,700 body cameras and its associated equipment have already been delivered and has undergone configuration. These cameras can record video for up to 8 hours and can be connected to a data management center at the NCRPO Tactical Operations Center. The body cameras and related equipment are set to be distributed nationwide between the end of March and the first week of April. Filipinos must understand the consequences of keeping the Visiting Forces Agreement or VFA between the Philippines and the United States in effect. The palace made this remark as President Rodrigo Duterte sought the public's opinion on the issue. In a briefing in Negros Oriental yesterday, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said Duterte is worried over the Philippines' fate once war erupts between the U.S. and its enemies. On Wednesday, the president said he is now undecided on what to do with the military pact. In February last year, Duterte scraped the pact, but this was halted already twice. Officials from Washington, D.C. and Manila are expected to meet this month to tackle issues over the VFA. Voters for next month's Palawan plebiscite will not be required to wear face shields in poll centers. The Commission on Elections says this measure seeks to enable more residents to cast their votes freely. In a briefing yesterday, Kalayaan Palawan Election Officer Juan Gonzalez said some voters in far-flung areas cannot afford to buy face shields, while some areas simply do not have supply of these items. However, face masks will be mandatory for all voters. The plebiscite on March 13 will determine whether or not Palawan will be divided into 3 separate provinces, namely Palawan Oriental, Palawan del Norte, and Palawan del Sur. Health officials have found no human-to-human transmission involving the B117 or the COVID-19 UK variant in Davao City so far. This was the result of the contact tracing done by the City Health Office following the first ever case involving a 10-year-old boy. CHO head Dr. Ashley Lopez said the boy has not traveled outside the city, while his family has no known exposure to foreigners. He said the boy's immediate household contacts, including his relatives, all tested negative and are about to end their quarantine. The city currently has recorded an 89% COVID-19 recovery rate with 771 active cases out of nearly 13,000 total cases. In Manila, the city government conducted its own simulation exercise of transporting COVID-19 vaccines from its central storage facility at the Santa Ana Hospital to 18 identified target vaccination sites in the city. Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Domagoso said that the activity was spearheaded by the Manila Health Department. Meanwhile, all 6 district hospitals of Manila have expressed readiness to have themselves vaccinated with the Sinovac vaccine. MHD officer in charge, Dr. Arnold Pangan, reported that the directors of the Ospital ng Sampaloc, Santa Ana Hospital, Ospital ng Maynila, Gat Andres Bonifacio Medical Center, Justice Abad Santos Memorial Medical Hospital, and the Ospital ng Tondo are willing to receive the China-made vaccine. Testing of vehicles in private motor vehicles inspection centers is now optional. The Land Transportation Office issued the memorandum on the discontinuation of the mandatory vehicle testing by private MVICs last February 11. DOTR Assistant Secretary Goddess Hope Libiran said the memorandum also stated the reduced fees to make them on par with private emission testing centers. Private MVICs must now lower their inspection fees to 300 pesos for hire vehicles, 500 for motorcycles, and 600 for other covered vehicles. Libiran belied the claim of Senator Grace Poe that there is no official issuance formalizing the optional vehicular inspections and lower fees at private MVICs. The importation of COVID-19 vaccines into the country has been made easier. This as the Finance Department approved the inclusion of COVID vaccines in the agency's Mabuhay or Express Lane, allowing the quick processing of tax exemptions for these items. Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez III also approved the waiving of filing fees and the use of tax exemption systems online filing module in processing vaccine imports in support of the country's vaccination program. Under this system, tax exemption applications for vaccine imports will be processed within 24 working hours. The policies on tax exemptions will be included in guidelines to be formed for the implementation of a one-stop shop for COVID-19 vaccines donated by international organizations as well as those purchased by the government. Up next, a new beginning for Marawi residents as they get permanent houses from the government. And ready to travel safely? We tell you how the province of Siquijor is gearing up to reopen its doors to tourists. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Alamin kung paano ang tamang pagsusuot ng surgical mask. Una, hawakan ang mask sa strap at siguruhing natatakpan nito ang inyong bibig at ilong. Tandaan, ang may kulay na bahagi ng mask ang dapat nasa labas. Ito lamang ang tamang paraan ng pagsuot nito. Ihulma ang nose piece o maliit na metallic strip ayon sa hugis ng inyong ilong. Iwasan ang paghawak sa inyong ilong at bibig. Kung marumi na ang mask, hubarin ito gamit ang strap at itapon ito sa isang basurahan. Siguruhin ang maayos na paghuhugas ng kamay gamit ang sabon at tubig. Ang surgical mask ay dapat gamitin ng mga pasyenteng may sakit sa baga o mga taong mayroong ubo, sipon at lagnat, mga nag-aalaga sa mga may sakit, at mga healthcare at frontline workers. Maaari ring magsuot nito kung kayo ay pupunta sa matataong lugar. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching PNA Newsroom. Task Force Bangon Marawi on Thursday handed over permanent housing units to some 109 families affected by the May 2017 siege in Marawi City. TFBM Chairperson Secretary Eduardo Del Rosario led the distribution of permanent house ownership certificates of the Marawi resettlement site and permanent houses Phase 1 in Barangay West Dulay. The task force assured the subdivision-like resettlement has electric and water supplies. Del Rosario said the turnover of houses to internally displaced persons symbolizes the government's commitment to pushing Marawi's full recovery and rehabilitation efforts. The 109 IDP families are the first batch among the Marawi residents to receive permanent shelters. TFBM said more than 3,000 permanent shelters are now in various phases of construction. The Police Regional Office in Caraga Region on Thursday condemned the Communist New People's Army for burning heavy equipment used in a vital farm-to-market road project in Surigao del Norte. PRO 13 Director Romeo Karamat Jr. said the burning took place on Wednesday in Barangay Binukaran, Malimono Town. At least 7 armed men poured gasoline and torched a dump truck and a backhoe, which cost around 5.9 million pesos. The suspects are reportedly members of the Guerrilla Front 16B of the NPA Northeastern Mindanao Regional Committee. Karamat said the road project would benefit farmers and fishermen as it would connect them to market centers to deliver their produce. He said that with the incident, the NPA showed anew its true color of being a terrorist group that is anti-peace and development. Authorities arrested on Wednesday a suspected CPP-NPA rebel tagged in the death of 3 soldiers in southern Negros last year. Joint police and military personnel arrested Dexter Almuete, who has an arrest warrant for 3 counts of homicide in Barangay Carabalan, Himamaylan City. The suspect is believed to be a member of the NPA's Central Negros II Centro de Gravidad platoon. He was tagged as among communist terrorists who figured in a clash between 94th Infantry Battalion troops and communist terrorists in Barangay Carabalan on April 19, 2020. 3 soldiers were killed and 4 others were also wounded during the 30-minute firefight. At that time, government troops were deployed to the area to secure residents claiming social amelioration grants amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The soldiers pursued the rebels, extorting food and money from residents. 2 warring clans in Basilan have peacefully settled their decades-long dispute and surrendered 20 loose firearms as they renounced violence. Basi Aba and Ustads Gapur of Barangay Sulyo and Baram and Mirang Hasan of Barangay Tong Umos in Tapiantana Island signed a peace covenant on Wednesday in Isabela City. Western Mindanao Command Chief Corleto Vinluan Jr. said they settled their dispute through the efforts of the 4th Special Forces Battalion in coordination with Basilan Police Provincial Office, Ulama Council, Council of Elders, and the municipal government of Tabuan, Lasa. The surrendered firearms were meanwhile presented to Joint Task Force Basilan Commander Brigadier General Domingo Gobuay. Since January 1 this year, a total of 70 loose firearms were turned over to the different joint task forces under the command of the West Mincom. In sports, the Samahang Basketball ng Pilipinas or SBP reassured its full support to Kai Soto despite the problem that he encountered with the NBA's G League Ignite. In a statement, the SBP said it will always be 100% behind Soto as he pursues his NBA dreams. Soto announced last month that he will leave Ignite to play for Gilas Pilipinas men for the 3rd window of the FIBA Asia Cup qualifiers. However, the games where Gilas is a part of were postponed amid rising COVID-19 cases in Qatar. Citing issues in quarantine protocols in the process of rejoining its G League season, Soto and Ignite eventually agreed to part ways. The SBP assured that they will support Filipino basketball players chasing their dreams on the international stage and provide a place where they can perform for their fans. The Department of Tourism is supporting Siquijor as it reopens its door to tourists. Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat emphasized the DOT's thrust to strengthen domestic tourism this year, as Governor Zaldi Villa signified his eagerness to allow tourism activities. Among the endeavors to gear up Siquijor's opening include conducting physical inspections on accommodation establishments and tourism enterprises. As of February 15, 37 AEs were accredited in Siquijor. The DOT has also endorsed for assistance 40 tourism enterprises, tour guide associations, and community-based associations, and approved 59 others. Known as the Healing Island of Central Visayas, Siquijor offers attractions for nature lovers, adventure junkies, beachgoers and divers, and culture enthusiasts. Siquijor boasts of its traditional healing culture, Cambuga High Falls, Paliton Beach, and Mount Bandilaan, where the sought-after healing festival takes place. Here's another look at today's biggest stories. The long wait is almost over. President Rodrigo Duterte will witness the arrival of Sinovac vaccines this weekend. A move towards transparency in law enforcement, the PNP begins its training on the use of body cameras for cops. And reviving tourism amid the pandemic. We take a look at Siquijor's preparations to reopen its tourism industry. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, visit our webpage or head on to the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also, watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know from the PNA Newsroom. We tell stories that inspire change. I'm Marita Muaje. Have a good day.